Welcome to Outer Travel in a Journey. My guest for today is Connor Creighton in Berlin. Hey, Connor.
Hey Alexandra, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Very good. Connor is here to talk a little bit about his passion around meditation, in particular, the Vipassana meditation, after having switched careers many times. So I'd say you're a life artist like me, like the length of my CV would be ungodly to my parents. So to speak to older generations, that is like something so unknown. But yeah, you've come a long way.
Yeah,
Tell
I,
us.
I wish I had known the word life artist when I was in my 20s and agonizing over like what am I gonna do? Oh no, another job, another change of country, and so on and so forth. But yeah, maybe they should have taught us the word life artist at a much younger age, right?
Yeah, I don't think many people know it still yet. When did you come about it?
Mostly just now when you mentioned it, it's not really something I've thought of
That's a
before.
very fast kind of recognition. Yeah, that's true. We're live artists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it'll be a sign that my healing work is done when I can kind of finally accept that I'm a life artist rather than just someone who is very changeable.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love it. But tell us what kind of drove you to change your life that many times and end up in meditation?
I think the usual, like I was looking to find ways, looking to find identities where I would finally feel some sense of contentment within myself.
Hmm.
And so, moved to lots of different countries, was in many different romances, and tried lots of different things. I think it's kind of notable that, say, the outside of bartending, the one career that I did most was journalist and writer.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the most satisfying moment for me in all those situations was seeing my byline, seeing my name somewhere, which is very funny. It's all so much about who am I? That's my identity because it's in the Guardian newspaper or it's on such
Yeah.
a website.
Yes.
And what was interesting, or at least what I think was very fortunate about all of this, is that I had some sort of success, published books as well, and had moments where I was like, is this fame? And even those moments were kind of hollow.
Hmm.
So I feel very fortunate that I got a tiny bit of fame, but not enough to
Yeah.
actually make me kind of believe in it. And so as a result, um, my life didn't improve. My relationship with myself didn't improve. And it got to a point where I think I was in my early 30s and I had some sort of one of many mini panic attacks that I
Hmm.
had through most of my life. And it was at that stage that I remembered that I had previously seen an advert on Facebook for Headspace.
Hmm.
And up until that point, Alexandra, I think I had been very, very cynical about meditation. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and very cynical about spirituality in general.
Hmm.
And still am. I'll admit there's a lot of elements of spirituality that I'm like, no, this is not for me. But in that moment, I suppose I was suffering sufficiently to try something beyond my comfort zone, and I
Yeah.
tried to meditate, and that
Hmm.
was the beginning of it for me. I
Hmm.
noticed already in that very first meditation that I did that, oh, there's a second of relief inside this.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I just did it on repeat for the whole day.
Really?
And
Wow.
then not long after that, I signed up to a 10-day silent retreat, which is perhaps in hindsight a little ill-advised. but but in the end, I mean, it kind of it diving in at the deep end taught me how to swim. Um,
Yeah, the big leap, right? And that's what I think too. Like I did, so-called stupid things, but it just shows how much the gravitational pull of that truth for us is at that moment, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's lovely how you sort of mentioned that, like how you describe it as a gravitational pull. Because
Mm,
as I go kind of deeper along this path, the more I recognize that there are certain forces, and you can in maybe in Buddhist terminology, you call it the Dharma.
yeah.
It may be kind of like the language on the streets of Neukölln, we'd call it the universe. But there are
Mm,
certain things that are, I mean, in Catholic Ireland, where I grew up, we'd call them guardian angels. But there's just certain kind of a protective schemata. And that's something that I've been really kind of recognizing a lot more. And that's very satisfying.
yeah, and I find it so important not to see this journey as an end of, like I
Mhm.
started in my 20s with yoga, and then suddenly it became the holy grail and it had to have all the answers.
Mm,
In some ways, it was important for me and my body because the gravitation was really big.
yeah.
Up, up to an extent where I didn't want to teach it because it was mine. I was like a little Smurgle. This is mine, yoga's mine. I'm not going to teach this. Not going to make it my profession. But what kind of kicked you further on the path?
With regard to teaching,
Yeah, and also kind of following meditation then.
yeah, well, I think the teaching thing just sort of came out of a combination of a runaway ego and then also a kind of a gently growing compassion. So
Mm,
I think at the start, because you know yourself, like when you start to meditate, it activates your empathy and it inspires a certain amount of compassion in a person. You know, as you begin
mm,
to discover your own mind and the habits and the difficulties and the suffering that you're experiencing, you recognize, oh fuck, everyone's experiencing this.
mm.
And that inspires a kind of an energy, almost like an activism, where you do want to help others. And I
Yeah.
think at the beginning, when I first started to meditate, I probably pushed help on people for the sake of my ego. I wanted to be considered this person. And um, I guess then, kind of as I continued to work, um, I began to perhaps step back from pushing it. And then maybe at the very beginning, I was probably a little annoying. I hope I'm less annoying now.
Who knows? But it's like I think when you kind of said what interests you most, and you haven't said it in this interview, but in like as a preparation for what we're going to talk about is to really develop compassion, and so that's my compassionate part. Okay, so I'm a bit obnoxious when it comes to my favorite new toy, like everybody needs to see it here. This is my new spiritual gadget, this idea, and why not be compassionate about that part of ourselves?
Totally. And I think, I mean, if you're not, there's a lovely expression, I think it's from Jack Cornfield, that if your kindness doesn't include yourself, then your kindness is incomplete.
Mm,
And I think as we approach meditation, we see that it really is the art of getting right with yourself, of accepting yourself and then responding to the things you do, the things that
mm,
perhaps you find are unpleasant in you, but responding to them with kindness, like boundless kindness. And I guess I traveled through my life with a lot of guilt.
mm,
It's a very Irish cliche, if there ever was one, with just guilt about leaving home, guilt about maybe hurting people, guilt about not sort of the way I treated my body with alcohol and things like this.
mm.
And then sort of trading that guilt for just this acceptance and kindness was a beautiful way to just transform a personal relationship. And I think anybody can do that.
Yeah, yeah. So let's move one step back for the dear listener. We jumped from you moved from a bit of meditation into a 10-day silent retreat at which we both laughed, and maybe some people aren't in the know. So can you describe a little bit why
Yeah,
that kind of
of course.
sparks?
So the 10-day meditation retreat that I did was a Vipassana retreat. Now, Vipassana is a very ancient style of meditation. And the retreat that I did was Vipassana as taught by this Burmese teacher called Goenka. There are different types of Vipassana, obviously, but the one that I did was taught by this guy Goenka. And the basic premise is that it's 10 days where you sit in silence, you meditate from anything from about 10 to 14 hours a day inside these 1 hour long intervals with small breaks in between. And the idea is not that it punishes you, but that it creates the perfect conditions for non-distraction. So you're in a kind of you're in a temporary community, and it's almost like a kind of a sensory deprivation chamber, and that you've no reading, you've no conversation, you've enough food, but not so much that you would kind of like gorge yourself and be distracted by the food. And so when everything is reduced like that, you have the opportunity to go very, very deep in terms of your meditation. So it's wonderful conditions, but also like any kind of deep internal work, it involves a huge amount of soul searching. There can be huge amounts of anguish, and you experience and reflect on so much that has happened to you and that you've experienced. But this happens within a very, very loving and supportive place. And that's always been my feeling with Vipassana, is that I'm crying my heart out into somebody else's arms.
Wow.
Metaphorically, we don't touch, but metaphorically, the community is supportive.